We always said in many, many videos, look, there are going to be a lot of unintended consequences of Brexit. Different sectors are going to be affected in vastly different ways. Some things are going to get hurt more than others. Service industries are going to get a lot more focus on the fact that they have to have a massive binder that they have to send every single time they have a European company to prove that they follow GDPR rules. There's a whole host of different industries having different pressures. It's madness out there. Like I say, different industries speak to many people. There's all different effects. I think I've said the story, I don't know how many times. Had a friend worked for sort of a big manufacturer. His job went from 2 minutes to fill out the usual forms to 2 hours. That is a big, big cost, to business, having suddenly to go from 10 minutes to 2 hours just to fill out forms. And remember, those forms themselves also cost money, which you also have to remember to make sure that you are accurately getting right. So there are a lot of consequences over this. As we pointed out before, industries will start to raise their voices about what is going on here, the problems, all this stuff that is affecting their industries. And we talked about the horticultural industry just very recently facing one of the first big industries facing a lot of problems because of Brexit. We are now today talking about the fashion industry and the problems that Brexit is causing in their sector. So let's have a look to say what's in fashion, and turns out it's very Brexit once again. As always, Brexit, the gift that keeps on giving. So before we do go over to today's story, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, etc. It was Wednesday yesterday, so there is a Pony Club video today. Yesterday that came out, so make sure you go check that out, and you can gain access to all the Pony Club videos by either joining the Pony Club, links down below, or signing up to the Patreon page as well. Either way will give you full access to all those videos. So let's crack on then into this with the industry, or the industry of fashion. Obviously fashion featuring industry on this. So this is written by a guy called Eric Musgrave. And its title is, In My View, by Eric Musgrave. What can be salvaged from the Brexit disaster? So, politicians are regularly criticised for not telling the truth. Keir Starmer is now being criticised for pointing out what should be the obvious to any sensible person, that the UK is in a dreadful state economically and in plenty of other ways, and it will take a long time and quite a bit of widespread pain to improve it. With Rachel Reeves, his trusty purse string holder in chief, at his side, the PM is very keen to remind we the citizens that the Labour government has inherited a 22 billion black hole from the previous incumbents, who, let's not forget, were in charge for 14 years. A lot of people seem to forget that, even though Labour has literally been in just over a month at this point, and yet, they've got big problems to deal with. Any government coming in after this is always was going to have a massive mess to clean up. Yeah, I am really befuddled by the fact that there's a lot of people just not giving them a chance whatsoever. The right-wing press, I can understand. However, I think a lot of other people, dial it back, guys. They've barely really been in at this point. So what Starmer and his well-versed cabinet colleagues have not said, however, is that one of the most significant causes of all this calamitous, there's the very calamitous deal that the serially inept Tories dumped on the UK to withdraw from the European Union. How Starmer, with his massive majority of Labour MPs, managed to salvage something from the wreckage of Brexit will be one of the toughest challenges of his term or terms in office. My concern here is not to rehash the merits or otherwise of the idea of Brexit, but rather to remind us of how badly it was executed. The arrogance and incompetence from the British negotiators has now resulted in a situation that surely is now far worse than anyone could have predicted. And it was obvious that the EU negotiators were going to make leaving as burdensome as possible for the British to discourage any of the other 26 member states from even contemplating a resignation from the club. And in the immortal words of Bruce Thorside, didn't they do well? I think one benefit the UK has achieved from Brexit, or am I missing something? So again, there aren't any benefits from Brexit. We know that. We fully know that. Um, I also must insist in the instance of full disclosure, I must confirm that I voted leave on the 23rd of July 2016, largely because I feared that the EU was drifting inexorably towards being some sort of pan-European superstate of sprawling bureaucracy far removed from its original idea of being an agreement for movement of free trade and peoples. So I think that's very honest. And I've said this before. If we are to rejoin in some way whatsoever, it's a different conversation for now. Convincing these people that voting that way in 2016 was a bad decision has not turned out have they as they had hoped is what we need to attract. We need to sort of start flipping those people over to saying, well, actually, rejoining the EU is a good idea. So back to this. So both of those elements I approve of very much. Having worked for about 18 months, first in Amsterdam, later in Milan, I then personally benefited from the ease of working elsewhere in the EU. I was not the only one of my family and friends to vote for Brexit, as far as I know. They have all let me know in very strong terms what they think of my decision. I become even mildly irritated when people who don't know me presume that I must be some sort of ferocious right wing headbanger to have voted for leave. Again, I agree with him. Don't just lump people into that ferocious white ring headbanger movement. The what he said for was wrong, but he's turned them round on all this stuff. I always point out that amongst the very wide spectrum of folk who thought that it might have been a different role for the UK were now the lineup of former British generals who commented at the bonkers idea of a pan-European army. The left-wing firebrands like Dennis the Beast of Balls over Skinner, who always felt that the union benefited big businesses more than citizens. And yeah, there was legitimate and there is legitimate criticism of the EU. I do not think it was a bad idea to consider a pan-European army a bad idea or a quote bonkers idea. I disagree with um, you know, Dennis Skinner on that. But again, there are ways you can criticize that. I'm pretty sure there are people who will feel that now, even in Europe, who feel that it benefits big business more than citizens is a legitimate criticism of the European Union from people who are living in Europe right now. So while I do not need to feel, anyway, continues, while I do not need to feel, let's start again. While I do not feel the need to apologize for my vote, I will admit that of naivety to expecting what the Tory strategy would be after the referendum. I thought there would be something like a 5-year period of dancing around with diplomatic handbags while the EU and Brits looked at how Brexit might work. What, and again, oh, we knew there were lots of people again warning about that, but again, didn't listen to the warnings of what would happen. That would, of course, that would be followed. I then imagined by another couple of years, at least, of the more serious negotiations to try and get the deals down on paper. I was in no hurry for Brexit to happen. I thought and did not want it to happen if we could not agree on a reasonable deal, whatever that might have looked like. Again, lots of people like this guy really were laboring under that intentions that Brexit, if we voted for it, would probably not be done for another 5 or even 10 years time. That there would be lots of other negotiations, even expecting maybe there would be a second referendum. Didn't happen like that. And of course, you've also got to remember the Leave campaign ran such a campaign like this on purpose to attract as many voters as possible. While, people like Patrick Minford, who were, telling the truth, were quickly, shall we say, gagged and rolled back into a corner when they realized he was giving the game away. Daniel Hanan, the infamous Sky News thing. Oh, a vote for leave isn't for leaving the single market and customs union. Only a fool would leave the single market and customs union. So, anyway, back to this. What I should have obviously been aware of, and now I understand, is that the Conservatives had pledged to start the process much faster. They intended to be out of the EU come what may, within little over as 2 years, with David Cameron now having jumped ship. It was then Theresa May in charge on March the 29th, 2017, when the UK triggered the trapdoor of Article 50, which meant March of 2019 was the initial expected exit date from the EU. As it turned out, Brexit Day then slid onto 31st of January 2022, by which time it was obvious that the quote talents of the Tory negotiators like David Davis, Oliver Robbins, and David Frost had proven no match for those of Michael Barnier and his EU team across the table. And well, we know what David Davis was like if you've ever read Michel Barnier's diaries of that time. David Davis had no clue what he was doing in charge of those negotiations. Now, almost 4 years on, it continues from the exit, and even 8 more since the referendum. We are now where we are, which is a shit show, to borrow the description given to me by the MD of the leading Made in Britain brand. So, what can we expect Starmer and his lot to actually achieve of getting us better trading agreements, which is my major concern. I must leave it to brains brighter than mine to answer. But surely the main element to consider is what the EU are prepared to countenance. You can imagine the EU bureaucrats have very little time for the British, whose enthusiasm for membership of the EU was often very lukewarm. And I fear that any rearrangement of the status quo will have to help the obvious tangible benefits for the EU. Can anyone tell me what they might be? Well, freedom of movement for under 30s, the youth movement program, which has been constantly floated not only by the EU but by other EU countries as well. I can think of a lot of British-based companies that would like to know. They all would. And here's the thing, a lot of the benefits that we could give to the EU, having, following their rules, procedures, etc., benefit British businesses as well. It's just that we don't have then a seat at the table to, rule making or anything like that. That's why, full EU membership should always be the really preferred one. So will Starmer and co obviously stand up and actually reveal just how bad the Brexit deal is? Or will it still too be a very decisive topic to address head on? As ever, the thoughts of our readers are very welcome. And just as a final thought on Brexit, for all the strong, not to say better opinions expressed since the 51% of those who voted for leave, and of course, while the 48% voted remain, it is worth remembering that the voter turnout was at around 33.6 million. It was only, of course, 72% of those registered as eligible to vote. There, we get that out. So more than a quarter of the population were not bothered to actually enough express an opinion. What an odd bunch we are. Again, should have always been something that people have brought up, that there was just not any constitutional mandate or anything like that. Had Cameron put one in, Leave would have never won. It would have not have crossed the 61% threshold. It would not have met the voter turnout threshold either. Had Cameron put any of those in, we wouldn't be here. Let's say that. I'm just interested. Has he expressed? No, there is no comment section, which is very disappointing. Very disappointing, considering he wanted that. But yeah, very disappointing on that. But hey, credit where credit is due. This guy, as came out and said, I voted for Brexit. I disagree with the reasons why you voted for Brexit. I fundamentally disagree with the reasons but at least this guy can recognize Brexit has been a disaster, that something needs to be done about it. Would this guy eventually maybe vote for rejoining a you know, European Union? Would he vote for single market customs union membership? I don't know. I have a feeling his thoughts may have even advanced maybe since then. I get the feeling from the article they certainly have. But as I've said and made clear many, many times before, these are the types of people who we also need to win over to, get us back in the European Union. And as you can see, that is working. It has worked a lot faster than a lot of people initially thought. Um, so that is at least good to see on that. So let me know what you think down below to what this guy had to say. I'd be very interested to hear what people have got to say about that. But of course, as always, like, share button, etc. Give him a good click. And of course, we'll see you all next time.